Hello and welcome back to another edition of Introduction to Operating Systems and Virtualization. My name is Scott Neal, and today we are focusing on installations and upgrades. We're going to be learning about the overall process of installing and upgrading operating systems from a very high or macro level today. We're going to also be looking at the factors involved in making the decision to begin with about whether or not we need the upgrade that we're talking about. And then we're going to be looking at the process associated with upgrading the system. Once we discuss the actual upgrade process, we're going to be looking at and discussing the differences between a regular upgrade involving one or two users with large-scale upgrades involving hundreds or even thousands of users. We're also going to be discussing the approach vectors associated with these large-scale upgrades, things we need to consider, areas of interest that we need to address before we tackle such a large project as that. And we're going to be also, towards the end of the discussion, looking at system patches, minor upgrades, and things of that nature, things that we would need to do maintenance-wise after the upgrade is complete. So what are the different types of operating system installations? Well, really, when it boils down to it, we have two types. We have a clean installation. Clean installation is what you may typically think of when you buy a system with no operating system on it from the manufacturer and you want to put an operating system on it for the first time ever. That certainly is a clean installation. But a clean installation also involves a system with an operating system on it, but we're not going to preserve that operating system or any of the data associated with that operating system. We're going to wipe the system and put a new operating system in its place. The other option, of course, is the typical upgrade. An upgrade is really when we have an operating system already in place, and instead of wiping and reloading with the newer version of operating system, that we have an upgrade path associated with that operating system to the new operating system that will allow us to upgrade that operating system in place without having to wipe the system. That allows us to preserve settings, preserve applications in their present, hopefully present configuration form, and that's oftentimes a little cheaper option for us. So the process of installing new operating systems from one operating system to another really does vary. However, we can break down the process if we look at it from a macro level into three stages: preparation, installation, and then any post-configuration steps or optional steps required after the installation process. So, what do we need to do for preparing for the installation of a typical upgrade? Well, one of the first things we need to do, particularly in a small-scale, single-user environment, is make sure the computer meets or exceeds the hardware and software requirements. This is going to also include ensuring that all of the equipment on the system is powered up, ready to go, and operating correctly. Things like defective disk drives, DVD drives, or a bad section of memory can make installation of a new operating system prohibitively difficult. And many operating systems will try to automatically detect the hardware connected to your computer. And if the hardware is not functioning, then you're going to end up with a non-working piece of hardware or even a failed installation. We're going to want to perform a backup. Needless to say, we would like to have a full system backup, but either way, we need to be sure that we've backed up all of the critical data at the very least prior to attempting an operating system upgrade. We're going to want to make sure we have all of our operating system CDs or DVDs or ISOs and all the licenses on hand to complete the installation process. And before we even begin the process of installation, we really need to understand what's special about this operating system. What general features am I looking to bring in as part of this operating system upgrade? Or am I going to have additional modules? Or am I going to have to check additional features to ensure that I've got all the functionality I'm looking forward to getting from this install? I need to have all of the DVDs, CD-ROMs, or files on a flash drive. For any device drivers that may be needed for any of the new equipment or for any old equipment I'm looking to move into the new operating system environment. I always like to have both the drivers from the old operating system as well as the new operating system on hand. I like having up-to-date and accurate information available about the computer and all the peripheral devices on hand too, so I have some sort of reference in the event of something going wrong. As far as checking the hardware goes, I'm going to want to make sure that all the external hardware is turned on and ready for use. Things like SCSI devices, printers, modems, scanners. I particularly want to be sure that I've got, if I'm going to be upgrading a server, for instance, I need to make sure that I've got the RAID control drivers in place. That's one of the first things I'm going to need as part of my operating system install. Without it, I won't even be able to see the RAID drive at all. I'm also going to want to have all the available information about the hardware. I want to know how many hard drives I have, what size they are, the types of disks, are they SCSI or SATA drives, and so on. And I also need to know how much memory I have, the make, model, video card, network card, sound card. I need all that information, as well as the type of device drivers for any peripheral devices I may have, my printer, my scanner, or any other peripheral device attached to the external nodes on the system. We're going to want to check the drivers. So there are devices out there that oftentimes require special drivers, vendor-specific CD-ROMs or DVD-ROMs, SCSI drives, some network interface cards, particularly printers and scanners or all-in-one printers, are going to require some special drivers. They can oftentimes be operating system specific. Drivers may come on a disk with the device, but they may not include drivers for all the possible operating systems. So we're going to want to make sure that the drivers we have are going to be compatible with the new operating system, and if not, we're going to want to make sure that we get those from the vendor. Newer drivers are usually available through the vendor. They're going to usually be faster, work better. They're going to address any kind of bug fixes, particularly for the operating system that you're moving into. So be sure to go to the hardware manufacturer's website and download the most appropriate driver for what operating system you're attempting to upgrade to. We're going to always want to perform a backup. Wherever possible, we want to do a full system backup. That means backing up the operating system as well as all the data on the drives. And it doesn't really matter if you do a Windows file, WIM file based backup, or whether we do a traditional image style backup using a product like Clonezilla or Ghost or Acronis. Either way, we want to have some sort of a backup in place so that if there is a failure, reverting back to the old operating system or being able to reinstall the old operating system is not that as tedious in case the rollback fails. Most operating system installs now have a rollback option in the event of a failed installation, but sometimes those rollbacks do fail, and I want to make sure that my backup allows me the most convenient reinstall route possible. Also, if I'm looking at upgrading a virtual machine, I might want to go ahead and take a snapshot of that virtual machine as a way of augmenting a system backup. Once I begin installing the operating system, I may need to provide some or all of the following type of criteria. I may want to know where in the drive directory or folder to install the operating system and what to name that folder that contains the operating system itself. Today, that's less of an issue. Many years ago, we thought we were pretty clever by moving the operating system into a new folder. We learned over time that this was less advantageous than we thought. It really didn't convince or trick anybody who may have gotten into the system that so they couldn't find the operating system. Generally speaking, if they can break into your system to begin with, they probably know how to find your operating system files. And there are lots of applications out there, lots of updates that are looking for the default file location or folder location for your operating system. So why complicate things further by renaming or changing these from the default settings? We're going to want to know what type of installation I want to perform. Do I want to do a typical operating system install, or do I need to do a custom or upgrade version of the install in order to get all of the features and functionality I am looking for from the operating system? Or better yet, to reduce the amount of features or functionality to make a leaner, meaner operating system for my users. I'm going to have information about me or my company, and of course the computer name, the workgroup name, the domain name, things of that nature as part of the installation process. I'm going to have the licensing information, verifying that I have the right to install the operating system for operating systems that require a license. And we need to know which components of the operating system I want to install. Usually this involves going in and vetting these options out with other users, with my IT team, and coming up with a list of features we want incorporated into the operating system and what components it's going to take to make sure those features are working. After the installation, of course, I want to keep all the product keys, all of the licensing, all of the activation numbers in a safe place in case I need them again. The installation is going to consist of generally these general functions. Operating systems usually begin by gathering system information and even running a hardware analysis. Windows is notorious now for doing a hardware compatibility check on the system. It's going to want to load and then run the installation program itself, do an unpack of the system files for the operating system. It will determine which elements of the operating system are going to be installed. It will then configure the devices and drivers before copying the operating system files onto the computer. Once it's all said and done, a restart of the system will finalize the configuration of the devices and any other preferences for the user. Most operating systems do have plug and play, so fortunately we no longer really have to go in and worry about assigning IRQs or memory addresses to the devices. This burden has been removed from us thanks to plug and play. When it comes to large-scale upgrades, the upgrade process is going to become exponentially more complicated when you increase the number of users who are being upgraded or involved in the shared resources of the system that we're upgrading. This is going to require your IT team to come up with a thoroughly detailed plan that will need to be devised and implemented. And this process is not a 1 day or 2 day process that you might associate with installing, a new operating system on your computer or your spouse's computer or your friend's computer. This process is going to take weeks or even months to complete. A lack of staff and resources is one of the primary reasons that operating system upgrades are delayed in many corporate environments today. And so having the right amount of staff, delegating responsibilities for each portion of the operations plan for installing a new operating system and really organizing who's going to be responsible for what area of the operating system upgrade can really be beneficial. Large-scale upgrades are going to include things like budgeting for, extensive testing, training, devising a rollout plan, and a migration strategy for each of the departments in my organization. So, before we actually tackle an upgrade or a new installation of an operating system, one of the first things we need to ask ourselves as an IT team is, why are we looking at this upgrade? Is it going to benefit our users? Will there be new features? Will I have a better return on investment? And will user productivity increase as a result of this upgrade? What benefits to the organization will occur? Will I have improved security, productivity, or even an edge over my competition thanks to this upgrade? But it's important to realize that we do not want to be bleeding edge. Cutting edge? Fine. But be wary of upgrading too soon. Let other people find the mistakes of the new operating system before you integrate the new operating system into your production environment. Another thing you need to ask yourself before you begin the upgrade process or deciding for sure that you're going to make the upgrade is, will I have the appropriate buy-in from my management, my staff, and from the users at large? One of the ways that we can ensure buy-in is to build an upgrade committee. That upgrade committee will have IT admins, management, power users, and representatives from each of the major departments as part of the decision process for what features we're going to have in the upgrade, how it should be configured for the operating system, what applications need to be carried over, and so on. We also need to address workflow concerns. We do not want to have to change the entire way that people do their business over the course of a day because of a new operating system or application. Some operating system vendors will offer pre-releases or beta software to try. Alpha software is an early development version which is likely to have a lot of bugs. But beta software usually has been successfully passed through the alpha test stage, has a minimal amount of bugs, and will give you an opportunity to look at, test, and decide on which features are going to be beneficial if I want to upgrade to that system. We're going to want to, as a team, ensure hardware compatibility. This is much more difficult in a large-scale upgrade operation. It's important to remember that all operating systems have certain hardware requirements. They're usually found in the operating system documentation or the vendor's website. Things like compatibility information for Windows 7, which can be found in the Windows 7 Compatibility Center. Same thing's true for Windows 10. Ever since XP, Microsoft has maintained special pages to address certain hardware requirements for each of their operating systems. Red Hat Linux has a Red Hat Certified Hardware Program, which offers manufacturers a software test suite for testing hardware. And an Intel-based Macintosh is required for Mac operating system 10 Snow Leopard or later versions of the Mac OS. Important, be wary of the word minimum. The minimum recommendation usually means that you can install the operating system, but you're probably not going to be able to use it very productively. So be sure to look for the recommended specifications instead of the minimum specifications, and try to adhere to the recommended specifications or exceed them wherever possible. Another thing that you should consider before you really begin an installation process is understand your inventory. So you're going to want to develop a hardware inventory and a software inventory that encompasses all of the systems in your network. I need to know all of the systems. I need to know the speeds of the systems, the vendors, how much RAM, how much storage, etc., in order to ensure that they're going to meet or exceed the recommended specifications. We're also going to want a list of all of the software that's in the network that's being used. Make some determinations about whether or not that software will actually be applied to the new operating system, whether it will need to be upgraded, or whether we're going to have to find another software solution to accommodate the upgrade. All hardware platforms and applications will need to be tested, particularly if I have significant numbers of a particular hardware platform. I'm going to also want to do a practice install or migration, and we'll talk about migrations in a minute. We're going to want to identify any issues that we come by, resolve them, whether that means contacting the vendors, and then document all of the work that we did, including compatibility issues and what resolutions were needed that need to be incorporated into our rollout plan. It's important to note that usually this is going to involve some sort of more money issue. Will I need more money to improve the hardware? Will I need more money to purchase additional application versions with licensing, etc., etc.? And this will have to be brought into the budget at some point during the early stages of our compatibility testing. Migrating means to move from one operating system to another, which may or may not involve implementing a new computer. Migrations involve moving the user data off of the old system and onto the new system in some way. Before we decide what migration path we want to take, we need to decide whether we're going to be performing a refresh, an upgrade, or a clean installation as part of the migration process. A refresh is simply the process of migrating user data off of the old system, wiping and reinstalling the same operating system version back onto the box. Refreshes are great for systems that are running sluggish, seeing degradation in performance. Perhaps they have been infected in the past, and when they were cleaned, the operating system files were not restored to pristine condition. Either way, systems that are used over protracted periods of time begin to see wear and tear, and at some point, removing the operating system and reinstalling the old operating system brings new life back into the system. An upgrade installation usually costs less, and you can select to retain all of the existing settings, data files, and applications. Clean upgrades, of course, are going to give you a fresh start by reformatting the hard disk, providing a much more stable platform for your operating system and user needs. This is going to take more time, of course, to configure, I also have to copy back all of the data files and reinstall all the applications as part of the process. So if I'm going to be migrating user data from one system to another, I'm going to perhaps consider using a migration utility to help facilitate that migration process. For instance, USMT, the User State Migration Tool, is a Microsoft migration utility that I can use either alone or in conjunction with other Microsoft products like SCCM to pull data from a current system, store it on something like a shared drive, and then divert it back to the new system once it has been correctly installed. The USMT and other migration utilities are often used in conjunction with a share folder to facilitate this move. And it makes it much easier because I no longer need to attach additional storage devices or direct cabling between two systems. These tools can also be useful for facilitating mass client system migrations. We're going to want to, as part of the migration process, check the hardware and software. Since Windows XP, Microsoft has provided a utility called the Upgrade Advisor that will check to see if the system software and hardware is compatible for the new operating system. If your organization supports many computers, consider keeping an inventory of the hardware. Also keep detailed records of all of the custom software settings, changes in the defaults, etc. that you may use from one user to another. And we're going to determine what software is used on systems prior to an upgrade so I can make sure it's compatible with the new operating system. Like any other upgrade, we're going to want to consider a backup, copying files from one computer to another, whether we're using a medium such as tape, DVD, another hard drive, or even a removable drive. Most operating systems do have a backup utility that we can utilize as part of this process. And of course, if you're going to be doing large-scale migrations, if you know that the migration tool will pull all of the user's specific data off of the systems, this also functions as a backup in sorts. Before backing up the information, we want to make sure all the open windows, programs, and files are closed on the system. And we're going to want to make sure that the software to restore the backups under both the new and old operating system in the event of failure. Make sure you actually make a full backup, not just a boot disk, but all of the fixed disks connected to the computer. And make sure the new system will be able to read your backup without any problems. We're also going to want to do a test migration, particularly if I'm upgrading more than one or two systems. I really should plan a test migration on at least once before I apply it to the production environment. Choose a computer that represents the lowest memory speed, CPU size, and hard disk, really the lowest common denominator in the network. That test computer should have all of the same software and be fully functional on the same network as the computers that are going to be upgraded. We're going to take notes as part of the process, describing the steps and any problems that arose and what we did to fix them. And we're then going to create a checklist based on these notes that documents the entire process. Once complete, have someone test the computer for a few days. During the test phase, ask an experienced user, we call them power users, to use and test the computer. We also want to consider power users as a way to test deploy, test out new configurations, new applications, etc., and incorporate their feedback into the production phase. Do not underestimate the power of power users. Power users can be a tremendous ally when it comes to buying in on new applications, new operating systems, or new environmental change for your department. Power users are your go-to source whenever you have questions about workflow, about how applications are running, how they should be configured for their departments, and so on. Utilize your power users and you will reduce the overall number of tickets that come into your system. Ensure that the upgrade did not change any settings or move or remove files or programs. Bear in mind these tests are time consuming. I may need a week, 2 weeks, or even a month to get through them. But it's better to find out during the testing phase that something fails and figure out a workaround than to fail a large-scale upgrade. Test results may also be used to explain to management why an upgrade or migration should or should not be carried out. Training should not be underestimated as well. When migrating to a new desktop operating system, training is going to be recommended prior to the rollout date for all of your users. Training should be multifaceted. This could be classes, training videos, training DVDs, or a collection thereof. We could even use fact sheets on websites with videos. We could get very elaborate with this. Training should be offered for server administrators as well as end users. There is an initial expense with training, but the return on investment is certainly worth it. It's important to remember that the last thing we want to do is diminish work productivity as we do the upgrade. We want to maintain as high level of user productivity throughout the install or upgrade process and really minimize productivity loss because of this operating system upgrade. We're going to also want to develop a rollout strategy. Performing a large-scale rollout is going to take time. We need to identify departments that have dependencies as part of this process. Do I need to upgrade the finance department as well as the warehouse department within the same 2 or 3 days because they work so closely together? We need to consider rolling out to your power users and then soliciting and incorporating the feedback prior to doing a large-scale production rollout. We also need to determine if we're going to be doing a staged rollout, which is more often than not the preferable solution, or rollout to all end users at once. There are pros and cons to both. And we're going to want to ensure adequate training time and notification prior to the rollout dates. Make sure everybody knows what's going on. Make sure they're prepared. Make sure when they come in Monday morning that they know that their operating system has changed, and maybe they need to come in a little bit early. We're going to also want to ensure extra IT admin coverage to address any issues during the rollout process and the days that the rollouts have ended and new employees are coming in and using that operating system for the first time. This is one of the benefits of doing a staggered or staged rollout process, is that I know that I can provide full coverage for each of those days for each of those departments. Last but not least, once we have rolled out an operating system, it's important to get the operating system on some sort of regular update strategy. Every operating system vendor provides bug fixes, security patches, interim upgrades, major releases, and so on. Windows Updates really works off a web-based function and allows you to download and install fixes, updates, and enhancements. This really started as early as Windows 98. And we generally like in major environments, corporate environments, we want to have some way of managing those updates. We can do this by using a Windows update server, a WSUS server, or SCCM, or some sort of rollout utility that will allow us the ability to test these updates on our test systems or our power users before we roll them out to the general production environment. This ensures that all of the updates will not damage the systems in any way and reduce the productivity of our workforce. Linux updates, well, most Linux distributions also come with an update module for obtaining the latest updates, as well as Macintosh. Mac OS 10 Leopard, Snow Leopard, and all the newer versions since offer software update tools that enable you to check for recent updates. And once again, for a single user or a private user environment, setting these for automatic updates is probably not a bad idea. Lack of updates is the #1 way that malware gets onto the system. So, when setting up for a single client or for your family, you might want to set it for automatic updates. But in a corporate solution, automatic updates is not acceptable. We really need to develop a testing and rollout strategy for updates. And since Windows Updates comes out the first Tuesday of every month, we need to have some process in place that will address those updates within 48 to 72 hours. All right, not too bad of a chapter. There are some basic types of installations, pretty much a clean installation and an upgrade installation. Clean installation is oftentimes the best bet, offers a much stabler environment in the long term. An upgrade installation is great when we want to ensure that we've retained the user settings, retained the application settings for an environment, or budgetary restrictions really don't leave us another choice. All installations can be pretty much divided into 3 general stages: the preparation stage, the installation stage, and the post-configuration stage or optional stage after the installation. Before installing or upgrading a new operating system, make sure that it's warranted to begin with. Are you going to reap any real benefit from this upgrade? You can apply that to anything in the IT environment, from operating systems to mobile phones. Ensure that your hardware is going to meet the requirements for your new operating system and that you have all the current drivers for the devices on each of the systems. Make sure the devices are going to be compatible with the new operating system as well. Before I actually do the upgrade, I'm going to want to make sure I have a working backup of the current operating system and the data on the system. I'm going to check my backup after it's made and make sure it can perform a restore before I actually begin the install. And for large-scale rollouts, we're going to actually have to sit down as a team and do some significant planning. That planning is going to involve some software and hardware testing. We're going to have to set up a training schedule for our users. And we're going to have a comprehensive rollout strategy that's going to involve using our power users as part of that process, and then develop a comprehensive rollout strategy that will adequately address each of the department's needs in turn for our organization with a minimal amount of downtime and loss in productivity. All right. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you for our next chapter.